I'm writing this because I don't know where else to put it, and because every winter since, I find myself thinking about that night, whether I want to or not. I've told parts of this story to friends before, but never all of it. Usually I stop where they start laughing or offering explanations. I don't argue anymore, I just let it sit where it lands. At the time I was 26 and working maintenance for a property management company in northern Minnesota. Most of my job was boring, checking heating systems, clearing snow, responding to emergency calls from tenants who locked themselves out or lost heat. Winter was busy, but predictable. Pipes freezes, furnaces fails, and people panic. This happened in January, during a week when the temperature didn't climb above zero. The snow had been coming down steadily for days. Not a storm exactly, just consistent, heavy snowfall that made everything feel sealed off. Roads narrowed, sounds disappeared. Even during the day, the world felt smaller. I was on call that night around 8:40 p.m. I got a request from one of our properties, an old duplex on the edge of town. The tenant reported loud banging coming from the basement and said that he had cut out an hour earlier. This wasn't unusual. The building was old and the pipes made noises when the temperatures dropped fast. I grabbed my tools and started my truck and headed out. The drive took about 15 minutes. The farther I went, the quieter it got. Snow absorbs sound in a way that's hard to describe unless you've experienced it. Even the engine noise felt dampened. Streetlights thinned out. By the time I pulled up to the duplex, it felt like I'd driven somewhere unfinished. Building sat alone at the end of a plowed road, surrounded by snowbanks, taller than the hood of my truck. Only one unit had its lights on. I parked, stepped out, and immediately felt how cold it was. The kind of cold that bites through gloves in seconds. As I went up to the front door to knock, the tenant, a middle-aged woman, answered the door quickly, like she'd been waiting for me right behind it. She looked relieved to see me. She told me the banging had stopped, but the heat was still out. She also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that it sounded like footsteps down there earlier. I didn't comment on that. Old basements make all kinds of noise. The basement access was through an exterior door on the side of the house. I went back outside, shoveled enough snow away to open it, and headed down with my flashlight. The basement was unfinished. Low ceiling, exposed beam, furnace at the far end. It was cooler down there than it should have been. My breath fogged immediately. I checked the thermostat and confirmed the furnace had been completely shut off. While I was working, I heard a noise behind me. Not a bang, not a pipe. It sounded like someone shifting their weight on concrete. I turned around expecting maybe the tenant had followed me down, without telling me. The basement was empty, the stairs were clear. I told myself it was the house settling, and then I went back to work. A few minutes later the sound came again, this time closer. I stood still and listened. There was no rhythm to it, no pattern, just brief, soft sounds, like movement that kept stopping whenever I focused on it. I finished resetting the furnace faster than I normally would. When it kicked back on, the noise completely stopped. And I went upstairs and told the tenant the heater will return gradually over time, and then left. That should have been the end of it. About halfway home, my truck started to lose traction. The snowfall had picked up, again, thicker now, faster. The road ahead had looked different than it had the way in, less defined, and I slowed down, then felt the tires slide. I ended up stuck in a drift, less than a mile away from the duplex. I tried rocking the truck, no luck. I got out to assess and immediately regretted it. The snow was coming down sideways now, visibly was awful. I could barely see my own headlights. I tried calling dispatch, couldn't get a signal. I ended up sitting in my truck with the engine running, telling myself to wait it out. Plows would come through eventually, they always did. That's when I noticed the lights. The duplex's porch lights were on again. I hadn't seen it from the road before, and I was sure of it. Now it was only a visible point referenced in the storm. Everything else was white and dark. I watched it longer than I meant to. Something about it felt deliberate, like it had been turned on for me. After 20 minutes, I made a decision I regret. I shut off my engine, grabbed my flashlight, and started walking back towards the house. It wasn't far. I could make it. The snow was deeper than I expected. Each step took effort. My boots filled with cold almost immediately. The wind drowned out everything else, and I couldn't hear my own breath. When I reached the duplex, the porch light just shut off. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. I knocked. No answer. Then I knocked again. Harder this time. Still nothing. I tried the door. Locked. That's when I noticed the basement door on the side of the house was open. I hadn't left it that way, and I was certain of that. Cold air poured out from the opening, carrying it with a smell that I hadn't noticed before. Stale, metallic, like something old had been sealed up too long. I called out. My voice sounded wrong in the wind, thin and weak. No one answered. I didn't want to go down there again, but I also noticed I didn't want to stand out there any longer. My hands were already numb, and then I went inside. The basement felt different this time, warmer somehow. Despite the cold air, the furnace was running, but the sound echoed strangely, like the room was bigger than it had been. Noticed footsteps in the concrete dust near the stairs. They were fresh, and they weren't mine. They led away from the stairs deeper into the basement towards a section I had gone near at all. I followed them. The further I went, the deeper it got. The furnace noises faded away until there was nothing but the sounds of my boot and my own breathing. The footprints stopped near a blank wall. I stood there staring at it, waiting for something to happen. Then I heard the tenant's voice. She was calling my name. It sounded like it was coming from behind the wall. I took a step back. The voice repeated itself, slower this time, wrong somehow. I didn't respond. I backed away, keeping my light trained on the wall. Then the voice stopped. I didn't respond. I backed away, keeping my light trained on the wall. Then the voice stopped. The silence that followed was complete. No furnace, no wind, no nothing. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back outside, gasping and disoriented. The storm had eased slightly, so I could see my truck's headlight in the distance. The basement door slammed shut behind me. I made it back to the truck and sat there until morning, too scared to turn on the engine, convinced that if I did, I'd hear something in the cab with me. When the plow finally came through, around dawn, I drove straight home. Later that day, I called my supervisor and told him I wasn't going back to that property. He said the tenant had moved out overnight, no forwarding address and no explanation. The duplex is still there. I pass sometimes in the winter. The porch light is never on anymore, but the snow gets heavy and the world goes quiet. I think about that basement, and I still wonder how long that voice had been waiting for someone to answer it. I've gone winter camping most of my adult life. I know that already sounds like a bad decision to some people, but for me, it was always about the quiet. Fewer people, no bugs, no sound, just cold air and space to think. This happened 3 winters ago, in early February. I took 3 days off of work and drove north to a state forest that stayed technically open year-round, even though hardly anyone used it once the snow set in. I checked the ranger station beforehand, and they told me there was no reservation for that section of the park, and probably wouldn't be. This is exactly what I wanted. I arrived just before sunset. The road in was plowed, but barely. Snow banks lined both sides, and the trees closed in tighter the farther I went. The campground itself was small, maybe 8 sites total, arranged in a rough loop. Most were buried under snow. I parked, shut off my engine, and listened. Nothing. The kind of silence that feels thick, like it pressed back when you move. I chose a site near the tree line, unloaded my gear, and started setting up while there was still light. The temperature was already well below freezing, and was dropping fast. That's when I noticed the footprints. They crossed the access road between 2 campsites, partly filled in the fresh snow. Not old, not animal, but footprints. I stopped and looked around. No vehicles, no lights, and no movement. I told myself someone must have arrived earlier and gone for a walk, or maybe they were already packing up and leaving. I didn't think much of it, because winter camping means that you are accepting that you are never alone as you think. By the time I finished setting up, the sky had gone completely dark. I started a small fire, cooked a simple meal, and sat watching the flames while the cold crept in. The woods around me felt endless. The trees swallowed the light after a few feet. Around 7:30 p.m., I heard a voice. It came from my left, from one of the campsites closest to the road.
Hey.
I turned startled. My headlamp swept across the empty snow, then caught movement. A man stepped into the edge of the light. He was bundled up heavy, thick jacket, gloves, knitted cap pulled low. I haven't heard him approach. He raised his hands in a casual wave. Didn't mean to scare you, he said. He arrived late and was just... He apologized for not announcing himself sooner. He said he figured I'd already noticed his truck. I hadn't. I told him I didn't realize anyone else was out there. He laughed quietly and said most people didn't expect company this time of year. There was nothing immediately wrong about him. Middle-aged, maybe late 30s or 40s, calm, friendly enough, but there was something about the way he stood, too still, like he was deliberately not shifting his weight. He asked how long I was staying, and I said a couple nights. He nodded and said the same. He lingered for a longer bit, then felt natural, making small talk about the cold, the winter's conditions, and how quiet it was. Then he said he should finish setting up before it got any colder and disappeared back into the darkness. I didn't hear him leave. I watched the tree lines for a while after that, then went back to my fire. I told myself I was just rattled from being surprised. I'd camped near strangers before. It wasn't a big deal. Later, while I was in my tent getting ready to sleep, I heard movement outside. Slow footsteps, crunching snow. They stopped near my campsite. I stayed still, listening. My headlamp was off. I could see the faint glow of my dying fire through the tent fabric. After a minute, the footsteps moved away. I didn't sleep much that night. After midnight, I woke up to the sound of breathing. At first, I thought it was my own, amplified by the cold air in my sleeping bag. Then I realized it wasn't in sync with mine. It was coming from outside of the tent. I held my breath. The sound continued, slow, controlled, close enough that I would hear it through the fabric. I reached slowly for my headlamp and turned it on. A shadow moved immediately away from the tent. I shouted without thinking, "Hey!" No response, just the sound of someone walking away quickly backwards to the tree. I didn't follow. I stood there with my heart racing, listening until the woods went quiet again. I told myself he was just checking something, maybe he dropped something, or maybe dropped some gear, maybe near my tent. Maybe he was just disoriented in the dark. I even knew that I was lying to myself at that point. The next morning, I got out of my tent. The cold was brutal. My breath came back into thick clouds. I checked the snow around my site, and there were fresh footprints that circled my tent. Not randomly, slowly and deliberately. I followed them back towards the other campsite. There was no tent there, no fire pit, no gear, no vehicle tracks leading away, just snow. I packed up immediately. I didn't care about finishing the trip anymore. I wanted out, and as I was loading my truck, I heard the voice again. Heading out already? He was standing near the edge of the trees, far enough back that the shadows hid most of him. Same clothes, same calm tone. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He nodded like he understood and took a step closer. "You don't have to rush," he said. "Storm's supposed to move in later." I didn't respond. I kept loading. Then he took another step. That's when I said it. "I've got a gun." It wasn't true. I don't own one. But the words came out steady like I'd rehearsed them. Then he stopped, and we stood there for a long moment, watching each other. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but his posture changed, less relaxed and more measured. He nodded once. "Good to be prepared," he said. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. I didn't wait to see where he went and got in my truck and drove straight out to the campground. I reported the incident to the ranger station later that day. They told me no one else had checked in or out of the park that week. After that, I didn't go winter camping alone anymore. Sometimes when I think about that night, what unsettles me the most isn't what he almost did, it's how easily he stopped. I don't tell this story out loud anymore, not because it's embarrassing or because people don't believe me, but because every time I do, I notice the same thing happen. The room gets quieter, someone always asks a practical question, and then the conversation drifts away, like everyone is relieved that it finally finished. I'm writing this because winter's coming back again soon, and I already feel that same pressure in my chest that I felt that night. This happened 6 years ago, during a stretch of cold so severe that local news kept warning people not to travel unless they had to. Temperatures stayed below zero for days. Snow fell constantly, not in storms, but in a steady, deliberate way that erased details faster than you could notice them before disappearing. I was driving home from my sister's place just after 9 p.m. It was supposed to be a 40-minute drive through rural highways and back roads. I'd done it dozens of times. A few minutes later, my dash lights flickered, then my engine died. The car didn't sputter or stall, it just shut off, like someone had reached in and flipped a switch. I coasted on the shoulder and stopped. The road was empty in both directions. Snow was already starting to collect on my windshield. I tried restarting the car, nothing. I sat there for a moment, listening to the wind scrape across the metal. I told myself to stay calm, cars break down, this happens. I called for help once I got signal. I stepped out the car, and then the cold immediately hit me. It felt aggressive, like it wanted something from me. My breath came out harsh and fast. The snow muffled everything, even the wind sounded distant, like it was happening somewhere else. That's when I realized how quiet it was. No traffic, no animals, no distant engines, just me, my car, and a road that looked unfinished. I walked a short distance up the road, holding my phone up, hoping for a bar of service. Nothing. I tried again in the other direction, still nothing. When I turned back around towards my car, I noticed there was footsteps in the snow. They weren't mine. They led to the passenger side towards the tree line. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I missed them earlier. Maybe someone had stopped before me and walked off the road. None of the explanations felt right. I got back inside my car and locked the doors, and I told myself I'd wait it out. Someone would eventually pass. They always did, right? After 10 minutes, I noticed movement in the trees. At first, I thought it was snow falling from branches. Then it kept happening. Slow shifts, subtle, like someone adjusting their stance. I rolled the window down just enough to listen. That's when I heard breathing. It wasn't loud, nor was it close. It was normal, and it wasn't coming from one direction. It felt like it was everywhere at once, layered into the silence. "Hello?" I called out. Then the breathing stopped. I waited, nothing happened. I rolled the window back up, heart pounding, and I was just telling myself I was imagining it. Then something knocked on the trunk of my car. Once, firm, like a knuckle against metal. I flinched and looked in the rearview mirror. I couldn't see anything through the snow. My headlights illuminated nothing but falling white. Another knock. This time on the driver's side door. I didn't answer. I didn't move. The knock came again, softer this time, like whoever was doing it was testing how much pressure it took to make a sound. Then a voice spoke. "I know you're in there." It was weird. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound threatening. "I can see your breath." I realized then that I hadn't noticed my breath fogging up the windows anymore. The cold had equalized with the temperature inside the car. There was nothing to give me away except maybe the shaking. "I need you to open the door. It's not safe out here." The snow around the car didn't move. No footsteps, no shadows. Just the voices coming from too close to pinpoint. After he said that, I grabbed my phone and pretended to be on call, and I spoke loudly, describing my location, saying help is on the way. The voice didn't react at all. "I wouldn't do that. You don't have service." I was shocked on how it just knew that. It or he or whatever it was, I don't know how it knew that, but it was right. I said the first thing that came to my mind. "I have a gun." There was a pause, then a voice changed, not in volume, but in tone. "That won't help you." Something slid across the hood of my car. Not scrapes, slid, like a hand testing the surface, or even jumping on it. I have no clue what it was. I screamed. The sound felt wrong coming out of me, thin and shadowed by the snow. The road didn't react, no echo, no response. Returning immediately after, the hand moved again, then stopped. The hand moved again, and then it stopped. I don't know how long I sat there, minutes, maybe hours. My muscles kept aching from being locked in place from one time. My jaw hurt from clenching it. Eventually the pressure on the car lifted. I waited, I didn't move, I didn't even breathe. And when I finally looked up, there were fresh handprints on the windshield, pressed flat, fingers splayed. The snow around the car was untouched. No footprint, nothing leading away. Hours later, or what felt like eternity, headlights appeared in the distance. It was a plow truck. I started sobbing without even realizing it. The driver helped me out, called for a tow, and kept asking questions I couldn't answer. Then they told me my car had no mechanical failures. A month later, I still remember what happened down that road. I always avoid going down the road, especially during the wintertime nowadays. Sometimes I can't get over the fact what happened, especially when it's snowing now. It's always a constant reminder of what happened to me.